coming up on Lawmakers. Revised residency restrictions for sex offenders pass the House. Democratic leaders take aim at tax reform proposals, saying education will be underfunded. And an exclusive interview with Appropriation Chairs Senator Jack Hill and Representative Ben Harbin. Those stories and more are coming up next.
This is Lawmakers, your source for all the news from under the Gold Dome. Here are your anchors, Nwandi, Lawson, and David Zelski.
Good evening, everyone. Also on Lawmakers, the Care of a Grandchild Act passes out of the House Judiciary Committee.
And it's Drinking Water Security Day at the Capitol. But first, our top story tonight, the House passes a bill that could revise Georgia's sex offender law. The State House passed a bill aimed at fixing problems with the sex offender law that cleared in 2006. Lawmaker Sandra Parrish has that story.
The problem was the residency requirement in House Bill 1059 that landed the law deemed one of the toughest in the nation before the state Supreme Court.
The effect of the court's ruling was to strike down all the residency restrictions here in Georgia, and now we're the only state in the southeast because all the other states came along and followed us and modeled themselves after us and enacted these residency restrictions. And as of today, there are no protections in our law.
Representative Lawson says HB 908 addresses the problem.
If an offender has complied with the law, purchased a home, this does not include rental properties, but purchased a home, has an investment in that property, and is in compliance with the law at the time of the purchase, and then a daycare facility, school, church, library, or one of these other areas moves in within the 1,000 feet, that person will be exempt from the operation of the law, and that's very simply what it does.
That Representative Alicia Thomas Morgan brought concerns.
Law enforcement will have to keep track of whom under their jurisdiction rents their homes, who owns their homes, and the date that they purchased them. I don't think this is what our officers have been sworn to do.
The bill may address the concerns of the state Supreme Court, but the Southern Center for Human Rights thinks it will only be thrown out once again.
I can virtually guarantee that this law will be struck down by the courts. The Georgia Supreme Court has been very clear that the takings clause, the same clause that led the court to strike down HB 1059, applies to renters. This law just doesn't make any provision for that. And, you know, it's not necessarily a matter just of being concerned about protecting the rights of offenders. You know, I think that the citizens of Georgia, the women and children of Georgia, deserve a law that's going to be upheld, a law that's going to be able to be enforced by the law enforcement community. And this just isn't it.
There are very specific requirements for proving ownership of property. In the rental context, you can have a verbal agreement, you can have a month-to-month lease, you can have a one-year lease. There's so many variations there that we basically could not come up with a solution. No other state has dealt with that either, so we're not the only one that's wrestled with that. I think that would have been an exception that truly would have swallowed the rule.
The bill passed 141 to 29 and now goes to the Senate. For Lawmakers, I'm Sandra Parrish.
Democratic leaders unveiled two pieces of legislation today that they say will lower property taxes and increase funding for schools. Lawmakers Bridget Snapp is live at the Capitol with that story. Bridget.
David, Democrats argue that the state has cut $1.5 billion in school spending since 2003, and these cuts have forced local school systems to raise property taxes. The first part of their answer is to provide $600 million from the state's reserve funds to local school systems over the next 2 years to reduce property taxes.
It is immediate, it is effective, it creates no new taxes, and it shifts no taxes. It simply is a way of returning to taxpaying citizens a part of the reserve that they themselves have helped build.
The second bill, sponsored by Representative Kathy Ash, proposes to fully fund the Quality Basic Education Act with the state's reserve funds over the next 2 years.
This piece of legislation is a long-term way to say the state of Georgia absolutely cannot be in the business of starving our local school systems.
Democrats say their tax proposal is preferable to the numerous Republican proposals currently before the Assembly.
Now, we sat and allowed our friends on the other side of the aisle to spend this summer going all over the state talking about their versions of property tax relief and of tax relief. They came up with one version, H.R. 900, which constituted a plan that would have put the revenue stream for education at risk and would have had to fill a $8 to $10 billion hole in the taxes. There are other plans out there floating about, and what we wanted to do was to provide a tax cut that was meaningful to families in Georgia who we know are hurting, and also was consistent with our values as Democrats.
Both bills are expected to be introduced tomorrow. Reporting live, I'm Bridget Snapp for Lawmakers.
Thank you very much, Bridget. And in any session of the Georgia General Assembly, the single most time-consuming piece of legislation is the budget. Last week, the Joint Appropriations Committee heard budget recommendations from Governor Perdue and leaders of key state agencies. Today, Nwandi and I had a chance to sit down with the House and Senate Appropriations chairs. We began by discussing how they are approaching Georgia's budget during the current national economic downturn.
I may be on the lower side of pessimism or on the higher side of pessimism in that regard. You know, I really am concerned about Georgia's economy, and I think what it does do is make us be very cautious about any new entitlement programs or any pay raises that extend into future years. I think the revenue estimate for this year and for 09 is perfectly satisfactory, but in a time of declining revenues, you just don't want to extend your expenditures out into a range that you can't see that far.
Chairman Harbin, you heard a little about the housing market. I remember you were asking some questions during the budget briefings. Tell us about that.
Well, I mean, we just have the concerns. It's the same concerns I think Senator Hill has. That the revenue estimate, I'm fairly comfortable with the 5.2, I believe, estimate for 09, but there are concerns when you see a downturn of the European markets yesterday. I mean, we're seeing a global downturn, and I think he's exactly right. We just need to ensure that we're putting the money into those programs that are there and been successful in meeting our needs. I don't know it's the time to be creating new programs or new entitlements. I think we just need to be cautious. It's not that we're trying to be gloom and doom, but we want to make sure that the state of Georgia's fiscal picture remains solid for the future, and I think a little cautiousness is appropriate right now.
Well, it's interesting, of course, with people, hearing about our revenue estimates, everyone has a project that they want to see funded. We've heard about the possibility of pre-K for 3-year-olds and some other programs. What is the process for whittling these things down and determining what will make it through?
I think from our perspective on the House side, and I think Senator Hill does a good job of this as well, you try to meet the needs. You got members that have very important needs, and they're going to come and they know what they need in their district. But we do ask for there to be some local support to try to participate, so that it's not just the state committing dollars to something that will go on from here on. You want to make sure that it's something that can sustain itself, hopefully, down in the future, but also something that meets that need in the community, if it's going to meet that need in the community, then you can fund it and you do it. And the thing about the term pork that gets used so often is that people will call something pork typically because it's not in their area. But in that community, sometimes those needs are being met and they support a vital component of that community. And I think it's important for us to always consider those. We can't do them all. We have to remain cautious throughout this year. But you still have to give every one of those a good look-see. And if they're willing to come up with the money to support it, then I think the state sometimes has an obligation to help them.
Is there any specific mechanism or a scientific approach to determining these things?
We've tried. We actually put into writing what we describe as our principles of budgeting that we are going to be using, and they're no rocket scientry here. It's concepts I think the House and Senate both have used, but as it pertains to local projects, what is written in our principles is that we believe that the individual legislator has a right to help set priorities within their district. And when we're looking at projects that are large projects, then I think we need to look at regional and state impact and measure that as well. Of course, we have a local assistance grant process that's, I think, much cleaner and controllable than the process that Congress uses or misuses, as the phrase may be.
One of the issues that has been building over the last couple of years has been the trauma network, getting that together. It's been estimated that it's going to be an $80 million yearly project, and the governor has put $53 million in. How do we plan to fund that year after year?
Well, I mean, I applaud the governor for the $53 million. I think that's about half a year's funding. That's the first significant amount of money that's going to a trauma network. So that's a good first step. Now, he did put it on us to try to find a revenue source, and I think that's still being debated. What will that revenue source be? There's discussions from the Speaker who's talked about the $10 tag fee after we remove the ad valorem tax from cars. And that's an idea. There's a cell phone bill out there. There's premium taxes that are being talked about, maybe dedicating a portion of that. All of those are viable because it spreads it out, and the trauma network benefits the entire state. So you're spreading that out. But the one thing I think that we're all very aware of is we don't want to raise fees to do it. If there's a way to do it, like with the $10 tag fee, you're removing the tax, so you really haven't raised anything. You're just dedicating a source from there. So I think that's the key this year is how do we do it without raising taxes or fees? How do we come up with a source to fund that trauma network, which will be $80 to $120 million in some cases, but we need it. We need it all over the state. We only have 4 level 1 trauma centers right now because we lost a cab last year. We need a level 1 trauma center in southwest Georgia. So we need to get the funding source there because it benefits all Georgians. Because right now, if you're in a severe accident in southwest Georgia, the chances of survival are very slim because you're so far away from a level 1 network.
When we look at Grady as one of the major trauma centers, what role is Grady going to play in the budget, and how significant a chunk of that money should they be getting?
Well, I think it depends on the design of the trauma network, the different levels of trauma. I think Lieutenant Governor has stated something that we certainly believe in the Senate is we shouldn't create a new entitlement program. What we should do is create if necessary, create a funding source, but it shouldn't be totally dedicated. Maybe it should be coming from general revenues, but we have created a source of funds to feed it into that pot, so that what we're doing is allocating funds based on need and not just on the fact that we've got more funds. And I think we've seen a couple of instances lately where that misunderstanding may have caused a lot of problems.
You know, the session began with a bit of contention between the House and the Senate over overriding some of the governor's vetoes. I'm wondering, is there any impact to the budget process, particularly with some of the vetoes like House Bill 229, which has to do with Hope Scholarship funding?
Right.
How do you figure out how much money you're going to allocate to something not knowing exactly where that legislation is going?
Well, that one really won't require any additional funding. And Senator Hill, like myself, we both are passionate about the Hope Scholarship, maintaining it and keeping those reserves so that the program continues on forever. But what we did with 229 was it was very simply a book allowance that Hope Scholars get. If reserves go down by as much as $1 right now, or as little as $1, their book fee is cut in half. The second year, it goes down another $1. It's gone, and then it gets into other fees the third year. And what we try to do is establish a trigger mechanism that would help still support the reserves so they'd remain high, but it had to go down by a certain percentage before you started taking those fees away, those book fees and athletic fees, all those other fees that are covered by Hope, from that student, because the purpose is to keep that money there so they will stay in college, don't have any additional fees. And I hope the Senate will consider it. We've done our part. It doesn't require any additional money. I'm not going to sit here and say we're going to hold the process, because that's not the way it works. But we've done our part in the House because we felt that was an important bill, along with the other 11 that we overrode. It was not personal. It was not against anyone. It was about doing part of our constitutional obligation to try to meet the needs of the people who've elected us.
Senator Johnson said in a press conference yesterday that the supplemental, at least, is moving along very smoothly. It's probably going to go a little faster than the norm. Do you all believe this is true?
I think so. Obviously, the House gets it first, but I think that it will move along smoothly. There's not an awful lot of money to spend in that budget, and frankly, given the economic situation, I think the governor's used pretty good judgment in defining his focus. He's got some trauma funds in there, and he's got some school bus funds and funds for technology. Those are good, appropriate uses for one-time funds, and I would consider them critical needs. So I don't, from our standpoint, I don't see a lot of changes in that budget. But we'll obviously be interested in what the House does, and it's a partnership. It's a three-way partnership, and we'll be in discussion with both of the other sides about our version as well.
We had some slowdown, of course, last year, you remember, with the peach care and what was going on from the federal level. Do we foresee that there are any challenges coming down this year that would stall the budget process?
Peach care kept us here way too long last year. But fortunately, this year, I don't see anything like a peach care. Peach care's got a temporary fix for, I think, 18 months, which should keep that off the table as a discussion to how do we fund it, or do we have to fund the part that's the federal government's responsibility. So I don't see anything like that, but I want to follow up on the amended as well, because Senator Hill is right. We hope to vote on that next week, which is fairly quick. We have been working, our House subcommittees are working very quickly. You know, when you look at what's in there, I think it's a lot of good one-time things that quite frankly, we did some last year. But I think it's a good budget process that we're working through. Get to them. They'll make changes, you know, because we all have different priorities, but I think in the end, the amended process will be through fairly quickly so that we can get to the very large 09 budget and go over some of the things that need to be dealt with in there, from trauma to education. Education's a major issue. And water management. I mean, there's reservoir money in 08 amended and in the 09 budget. So that's important to the citizens, and I think that they're ready for us to move this along. And, you know, Senator Hill and I have such a good relationship. It doesn't always play out that way. But I think people are ready for us to move on, get the budgets done, and get back home and let the state of Georgia continue to be the good state it is, and not get tied down with the fights like we had last year, which sometimes I think they were kind of taken out of context, because this is a good man, and I'm fortunate to be able to work with him, and I think we do have a partnership, and we both care about this state. We're different parts of the state. Sometimes our priorities are different, but that doesn't make one right or one wrong. It means we've got a responsibility to people in our districts and to this state, and I'm proud to work with him.
Well, we know you're both very busy with the budget process right now, so we thank you both for joining us here on Lawmakers.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, in other news, the House was reminded today of the importance of a statewide trauma network, first by the doctor of the day.
Half of all hospital admissions start in the emergency department, and over 80% of all unscheduled admissions start there. But the overcrowded emergency departments in Georgia are being strained to the max. Hospitals are closing. We're boarding patients in our emergency department. Ambulances are on diversion. We need help with the trauma system and litigation.
A few minutes later, Columbus Representative Carolyn Hughley recognized a Children's Miracle Network Champions Across America awardee, a young man who overcame a severe bicycle injury, thanks in part to care at a regional trauma center.
Because of his courage, his tenacity, and his perseverance as he recovered, he has been chosen for this great honor, and he is from Columbus, Georgia, and the doctor of the day was talking about how important trauma care is to us. And we have a great trauma care center in Columbus, at Columbus Regional Medical Center, and he's here with us today. His name is Cameron Page, and he's up in the upstairs. If you would stand up for us, Cameron, and please let us congratulate Cameron Page.
And today, the House Education Committee approved the creation of a commission to enhance the development of charter schools in Georgia. Lawmakers Keosha Jackson has more.
If passed, House Bill 881 would establish the Georgia Charter Schools Commission. Representative Jan Jones, who introduced the bill in 2007, spoke before the commission to persuade them to vote favorably.
Parents absolutely want more public school options than an attendance zone, and we're making progress, but we have a long way to go.
Representative Jones was joined by Andrew Broy from the Department of Education, who explained how charter schools will be funded under the new commission.
We have two types of charter schools in Georgia for funding purposes. With respect to local charter schools, or locally approved charter schools, they're entitled to the funding that any other traditional public school would get. With respect to state chartered special schools, however, because they were not approved locally, the statute currently states that they're only entitled to state funds. What this bill proposes to do is to create a different mechanism for funding what are called commission charter schools. They would be receiving all the state funding that such a school would get as a locally approved or a state chartered special school. In addition, however, they would get what the local share would be deducted from the state allotment from the sending district.
The House Education Committee voted in favor of the bill 22-4, and the bill now goes to the House Rules Committee. Representative Brooks Coleman, chair of the House Education Committee, hopes to see the bill on the floor by Thursday. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm Keosha Jackson.
The Georgia Right to Life organization held the first of many planned press conferences in front of the Capitol today to support House Resolution 536. Lawmakers Minu Hosseini has the story.
The legislative director of Georgia Right to Life, Mike Griffin, spoke in support of H.R. 536, an amendment that defines life as beginning at fertilization.
What we see now is actually that human dignity is under attack. And we here at Georgia Right to Life believe that we have found a piece of legislation to defend all human life.
Supporters of this legislation say that the bill restores personhood to all people from fertilization to natural death. However, a representative from Planned Parenthood said that access to birth control and comprehensive sex education is what will keep Georgia women healthy and safe, not this bill. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm Minu Hosseini.
Now, tomorrow, lawmakers will have coverage of Planned Parenthood's Women in the Halls initiative to combat H.R. 536 and legislation requiring parental consent for minors seeking birth control. Now, last session, lawmakers named today, January 29, 2008, Drinking Water Security Day. Lawmakers Andi Dixon attended the event.
Members of the Georgia Rural Water Association gathered in the rotunda to observe the first ever Drinking Water Security Day. The day is dedicated to ensuring that Georgians have clean drinking water. Dressed in matching attire, association members welcomed Lieutenant Governor Casey Cagle, who thanked them for their efforts toward teaching people how to use water efficiently across the state. He says their work is especially important in light of the ongoing drought.
We all know of the drought that we're experiencing today, and particularly in some areas, the challenges in which communities are facing. We appreciate what you do to help them work through those challenges, making sure that not only are they interconnected, but also in case of the drought would worsen, you prepared ways in which they can get out of that in an efficient way. We appreciate that very, very much.
Senator Lee Hawkins says because of the statewide water plan, which calls for individual regions in Georgia to assess their water needs at the local level, the association's work is of special note.
So we will actually let local, and this is set up for local folks to make the decisions for each one of those areas. And so obviously, again, quality of water is one of the main points of what this legislation is about, and the quantity of water.
The state water plan passed both the House and the Senate in the first week of the session. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm Andi Dixon.
Governor Perdue received an $811 million check today from the Tourism Alliance of Georgia. The money represents local and state tax revenue generated by the tourism industry in Georgia in 2007. Lawmakers Caroline Niaga has more.
On behalf of the tourism industry, we want to present this check here that shows the significant tax savings that we're giving to all Georgians here in the state. The more money that travelers spend, the less money that we're paying in taxes. And so on behalf of the tourism industry, we present this check to you representing the tourism expenditures and taxes that's generating.
Very good. Thank you so much. Every year on Tourism Day, we take time to recognize the vital role this industry plays in Georgia, and as you know, it's the second largest industry in the state. Tourists spending more than $17 billion every year, supporting almost 220,000 jobs. That's a huge sector of our economy. So I'm pleased to present the 2008 official state travel guide again. This book encourages visitors to see what we have to offer in our state. And Ken, it's my honor now to present to you and proclaim January 29, 2008 as Tourism Day in Georgia.
About 80% of the people going to Florida, which is one of the few tourism states larger than us, we want to get a fraction of those people just to come off the freeway, stop in Georgia, spend a day or a night or two, and enjoy some of our attractions, venues, and our great hospitality, as we talked about this morning with the Hospitality Highway and those type of things to bring awareness, and then, of course, our great Georgia tourism guide.
The travel guide is also translated in 5 foreign languages. You can get a free copy from your local state visitor information center or call 1-800-VISIT-GEORGIA. You can also log on to georgia.org and click on travel. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm Caroline Niaga.
We'd like to recommend a website that's a valuable resource for information about the Georgia General Assembly. Go to www.legis.ga.gov. That website is a great research tool we at Lawmakers use on a regular basis.
During his weekly press availability, Representative Jerry Keene told reporters yesterday that the time has come to adopt a statewide transportation plan.
We do need a statewide measure. I think the Speaker has made it very clear in his remarks in recent days that the time for study has passed, it is now the time for action. And if we are in fact going to propose some funding mechanism for this transportation crisis that we're in, and by all accords we have a funding crisis over at DOT at this point in time, or by all reports rather, if we don't act this session, you're basically waiting 2 more years and then in November before it can be taken before the voters, and any revenue generated from that is usually 12 to 18 months. So you're talking about 3.5 to 4 years, and I don't think the people of Georgia want to sit in traffic and drive up and down dirt roads another 3.5, 4 years while we do yet another study. I think it's time to act.
Recognition of the 2007 Little League World Champions gave the House and Senate a chance to applaud the sluggers from Warner Robins. It also aroused the excitement of the chair of House Ways and Means.
In the bottom of the 8th inning, with eyes of the world upon them, won the Little League World Championship with one incredible crack of the bat for a walk-off home run. Then something else happened again with the eyes of the world focused on these young athletes, their families and coaches, and in an unprecedented gesture of kindness, these exemplary Georgians, by example, set, in my opinion, a new world standard of sportsmanship, when without provocation ceased their own deserved celebration to embrace their opponents and share with the Japanese team the traditional victory lap around the Williamsport field. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, the world champion Little League team.
ESPN will be calling him any day now. The Warner Robins team sailed through an undefeated regular season with only 2 weeks of preseason practice. The 2006 Little League World Champions were from Columbus, Georgia. Well, coming up tomorrow on Lawmakers, coverage of the Care of a Grandchild Act, which passed House Judiciary today. Also, a measure designed to help combat identity theft is expected before the House. Governor Perdue announces health care legislation, and Georgia's transportation funding plan will be unveiled. We'll have those stories and all the latest Capitol news tomorrow night at 7. If you've missed any part of this Lawmakers broadcast, be sure to tune in tomorrow morning when Lawmakers repeats at 5:30 a.m. You can also keep up with all the action under the Gold Dome daily on your local GPB radio station during Morning Edition, All Things Considered, and evenings at 6 p.m. on Georgia Gazette. Now stay tuned for Georgia Outdoors. Tonight's episode features Georgia Getaways. Georgia Outdoors is coming up next here on GPB.
And that is our broadcast for this, the 7th legislative day of 2008. I'm David Zelski.
And I'm Nwandi Lawson. Have a great evening.
Production of Georgia Public Broadcasting.